Vulindlela. So I saw that you are getting some quite good allocation there. Therefore, I need to single you out as Transnet. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming through, and Dr. Pulani, and to the panelists, good luck. Let's engage, let's discuss. And I think from what I know from the onset, we'll be discussing and deliberating with you guys on analyzing and trying to connect the dots around the budget speech. Otherwise, thank you so much and have fun. Good luck.
Thank you so much. And apologies once again for delays in starting, but we will be finishing at 10:30, for which you will have an opportunity to mingle if you have a bit of time to spare with us. As we know, that budget speech is more than just numbers. It is a statement of intent. It actually reflects the government priorities. It actually sets the tone for the economy and its impact on businesses and individual alike. So our goal today is to really explore and unpack some of the key aspects of the budget that was presented this week. And then how does it impact on the business realistically? What does it mean? With that said, I am joined by esteemed panelists who will be engaging us. And I'd like to invite you to please feel free to ask questions. Virtually, we will take questions as well so that it becomes a very engaging and participatory type of a session. And I'm hoping that after the conversations that you're going to have, because each of these panelists, they are actually bringing some unique expertise into the conversations. I hope that after this breakfast session, it will be actually clearer to us as to what does the current proposals mean to the business and how can we go ahead to come up with some of the strategies for our own businesses. Without any waste of time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Arnold. Mr. Arnold February. He is the head or the regional investment manager for Business Partner Limited. Welcome, sir. Next to Mr. Arnold is Miss Lusanda Nechitembe. I hope I've said your surname correctly. She is the CEO of TAF 21. Welcome, Miss Lusanda. Next to Miss Lusanda, it is Mr. Madodonge Mpetwa, the head of tax for PPC Cement. You're welcome, sir. And next to him, it is Miss Shannon Friedman, who is the founder and the CEO of Vet Modernization South Africa. Welcome, ma'am. I think Mr. Philly does not need an introduction. We all know him. But I think before we start, I just want us to think about the current budget. Does it set the tone for us to thrive as businesses? Does it position South Africa for economic resilience? Or does it create new challenges for us as business, as the economy, and as the country? So this is what some of the key aspects that we're going to unpack today and see how does it impact on the business. With that said, I want to start with you, Mr. Arnold. According to you, in your own view and perspective, how do you think the tabled, I call it a budget proposal. It's not a budget speech yet because it has not been finalized, right? I'll say that. So, what impact do you see the current proposal having on businesses or SMEs?
Well, firstly, thank you and good morning to everybody. It's good to see you for those online as well. Thank you for joining us. Business Partners is all about entrepreneurs. We fund entrepreneurs, but you don't just need money. You need advice, you need knowledge, information, and networks. And today we're going to talk about that value-added services of giving our inputs of how SMEs operate and what affects you. So with regards to the question, I think it's important to reflect that in 2018, April 2018, there was a 1% increase in that. So we have statistics of what effect that has had in the income generation as well of the country, as well as how it affected small to medium-sized businesses. But it comes down to about 3 points. The first one is it cost a lot more operationally to do business. VAT is a very broad type of tax. It affects everybody. Even if you're a business that is not VAT registered, your costs are increased. So there's definitely an increase in operational cost. The second one is there's an administrative burden because now all of a sudden you have to change all your invoices, all your documents, you have to upgrade your systems to reflect that VAT. And 15% was easy to do a calculation in your head. So now 15.5, now you can't.
Well, next year you'll say 16.
Yeah, next year we'll say 16. And I think the third one is because of the crunch in your margins and the cost of doing business, you are actually forced, encouraged to work smarter, to be a bit more savvy. Because cost in itself is not the only metric to look at. I always say if something costs you 10, 12, 20%, but you're making 200, 300, 500%, then the cost is in line, it's relevant to your margins. So we're going to have to work smarter as entrepreneurs to bring our costs down, the ones that we can control, and be a bit more savvy in the way that we do business.
Okay, it is on. Thank you so much for that answer. And I think you're touching on something that is very important, and we will come to tax. We'll come to tax. But the cost that business incurs is not only tax. When you look at the current budget, the government is talking about even improving the road infrastructure through SANRAL, where SANRAL has been allocated 100 billion to actually road the national roads. And for me, on its own, I think transport infrastructure and logistics remain such a pivotal aspect to the businesses, especially when it comes to free movement of goods, because the businesses are in business so that their businesses and services or the goods and services can be consumed. And if the transport infrastructure is not in a state that is supposed to be, then it means that actually it will increase the business costs. So as I say that tax is very important topic, yes, but then there are other costs that the business incurs if our government are not actually planning better for success. With that said, Ms. Lusanda, what opportunities will you say that the SMEs can take or can seize given the current plannings that the government have? Or maybe let me phrase it differently, because with opportunities, there are also risks. What are the key risks that you think the SMEs are facing?
Thank you for having me, and good morning, everyone. Just to say quickly, I'm Lusanda from TAF 21, as mentioned, but I think we are known more for our product called Mastandi, which finances entrepreneurs in townships. Is this thing working? Yeah? Okay. So we finance property developers in townships, and that's what really that I'm here for today, because I think in the budget speech, what you see coming out is a lot of reforms that are being proposed for local government, and hopefully that will translate to better service delivery in townships. Because part of the challenges for getting township economic development really happening is that service delivery is even worse in townships than it is anywhere else. So I think that those reforms that are proposed are encouraging. I think that they are talking something around 2.4 trillion rands, if I'm not mistaken, in the next 2 years, that will be allocated to just making sure that our local governments and municipalities are better functional. And obviously the issue of the 1 trillion that is being allocated to infrastructure hopefully will see its way to infrastructure in townships being upgraded, and new investment in township infrastructure would be good to see. I see that you already touched on the issue of roads, but they are putting an allocation to water and sanitation and electricity, and obviously the whole energy conversation. And any property developer in the room or in the country knows that the biggest cost right now is trying to provide alternatives for water and for electricity. which makes your cost of a property investment much higher than it otherwise was a couple of years ago. I know it speaks about the VAT issue. It's zero point 0.5 now. It's going up to 16 by another 0.5 in a year's time. It's a significant cost for. So that's the part of the risks of investing that entrepreneurs have to deal with. In that your costs are obviously going to increase in terms of materials, professional services, etc. But your rental income, we've seen that since COVID, it's actually been stagnant. So you are not able to really raise your rental income. So your ability to raise revenue to carry these increasing costs is obviously not always possible. So that's a challenge that's coming. But I think that there's opportunity. So without just focusing on the negative, there's opportunity in the fiscal consolidation that's coming out of the budget proposal, in that there is intention to grow the economy. We all know 1.8% is not sufficient. We should at least be growing at 5% if we are going to be a job creating economy. I can predict or assume that the proposed increase won't really have a big dent on employment and job creation, and therefore the ability of property developers to attract new renters into their scheme, might increase, but it won't be that significant. So I think that we need to see more of that growth, but it's promising that we're starting to see focus on wanting to have growth coming. And obviously that fiscal consolidation would hopefully translate to an interest rate decrease. We will find out soon enough. I think MPC is meeting next week. So if they decrease the interest rate by at least 50 basis points, because that's the biggest capital cost for property investors, is the interest cover that they must pay. So if that decreases, obviously it improves the situation. So we're about to find out. Property is itself a 7 trillion rand industry, and I think that its contribution to the GDP is not always fully acknowledged. So I think that the opportunities are there, that hopefully with interest rates hopefully coming down, we will see that industry growing more.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lusanda. And I think I would like to touch on a few points that you have raised that are so significant. So you say we are being challenged in terms when it comes to revenues, but then there are other key aspects like municipality efficiencies that we can leverage off. And you're talking about water and electricity, which is such a key component to our livelihood, forget even businesses. I mean, we all know what has happened to us during the load shedding time. I'm hopeful that we'll be out of this electricity mess that we find ourselves with. And the government has got intentional plans as to how to combat electricity or load shedding situation. Water sanitation continues to be a key part. And when it comes to property, you touched on a very important aspect around municipality being efficient. I know for a fact if you have to register property and it takes too long to get your certificates, be it water certificate, electric certificate, it leads to a lot of delays. And obviously those delays have a negative impact on businesses. I mean, you've also touched on VAT, or you've also touched on tax in general. So I'd like to find out from Mr. Mado. Sorry, I always forget your name, my bad. What are the VAT or tax in general implications does this budget speech have on the business and individual? Because when you look at business, it's not only you that is impacted, right? You have employees, right, that you need to pay tax on. So what would you say is the impact of tax regulation on business and individuals alike?
Thanks, Dr. P. I think, morning everybody. I think it's quite important that when you're looking at business, I think the one thing that comes to mind is the fact that the corporate income tax rate has stayed the same. And of course, there has been a bit of noise around that to then say, why are we punishing the individuals or natural persons versus corporates with their rate staying the same? I think there's a bit of history that that goes with that. A couple of years ago, there were reforms that were presented in order to ensure that we broaden the tax base. Ultimately, an increase in the tax rate does not necessarily yield an increase in the amount of taxes that are collected. So I think that is why National Treasury has gone the route of then saying, instead of increasing the tax rate, we need to increase the tax base. I suppose the one thing that we then need to think of is, does the current economy of South Africa allow that to happen? As if you're looking at the growth, projected growth of 1.8%, will it then yield enough growth in terms of businesses and in terms of having more businesses included in the tax net? So I think that's the one challenge that they're going to have. But having said that, as part of those reforms, of course, one thing that has been introduced in previous years is that they've looked at companies that are making tax losses. And effectively, whether you're making losses or you're making a profit in any year, there is a minimum tax that is payable. Because ultimately, in a year where you are able to turn your business around and you are then making taxable income, there is a limitation on how much of those tax losses you can use going forward. So yes, it might on the surface look like the tax rate has stayed the same at 27%, but when you go a bit deeper than that and you start looking at things like the utilization of assessed losses, you do realize that there is a bit of income that the fiscus will be able to raise through businesses. And of course, I think that also then touches to another point around the strengthening of SARS as an institution. We saw that there's a 3.5 billion that has been allocated in the medium term to SARS as part of their drive to ensure that there's better compliance and so forth. So as much as, yes, there are no changes to business, but I think there will be more enforcement around compliance in order to ensure that there's a higher level of compliance from taxpayers, and they'll then be able to collect more income in terms of the fiscus. Yeah. So that is just on the corporates, and if I just take then a step towards individuals. So if we were to look at individuals, you'll see that I'll start off with the individual tax tables and the tax rates that are applicable there too. Those have not been adjusted. Okay, so the tax tables for individuals remain the same. But I think, however, by not making any change to that, effectively, taxes have been increased. Okay, because all of us will probably get a salary increase, and as a result of that increase, there's of course a tax bracket creep. In that, once you get that salary increase, you might just move into the next tax bracket, and through that, they are then able to raise additional revenue for the fiscus.
Thank you so much. I mean, tax regulation, it's such an important concept. And I would like to actually invite Ms. Shannon as well as you, Mr. Shilboy, to weigh in on the impact. I mean, Ms. Shannon, I mean, if I look at you and some of the work that you're doing, you look at the modernization, English sometimes, of tax in South Africa, but not only in South Africa, also in the markets that are similar to South Africa as well as developing countries. So can you please share with us as to what are you seeing and how do you think that South Africa is going about in modernizing the tax efforts?
Don't hold it on. All right. Maybe just to start off, what I think is quite important is to speak to everyone as SMEs and entrepreneurs, and really why we need to understand why it is important to care about increased tax compliance and modernization, and empowering SARS from its perspective. Now, all of us contribute to country's revenue. And when there is a deficit, some of that burden falls onto us as small businesses. And we've seen this already play out with the increase in that, okay? When it comes to compliance in this country, there's a significant VAT gap that is occurring each year, where the country is losing hundreds of billions of rands each year due to gaps in compliances and leakage. I think from that alone, we're looking at upwards of 50 billion rand being leaked out of the system each year. Now, just to put that all in perspective for you, the amount of money that government is looking to get back from this increase in the VAT percentage is only 28 billion. So you can see there's much larger amounts that are getting lost through the system each year just due to a fact of non-compliance. Now, what we can see, as Mother Donke already pointed out, is that government has allocated an additional 4 billion rand over the medium term to SARS to help it with its compliance and its modernization objectives, allowing them to get greater visibility into what's happening with businesses and people's tax transactions, as well as to leverage AI and other data techniques in order to identify fraud more efficiently and more effectively, and really use their resources more effectively to track down those sources of fraud.
I think let me come in there. With the budget allocation to SARS regarding the modernizations of their system, I want to give you a practical example of what's happening. One of the things that have been listed in the budget documents is the codifying of inspectors. And I don't know if most of you guys might have seen that. So what SARS started doing in the last few months is that when you are, let's say, an SMME, and you want to do what you call voluntary VAT registration, what SARS will do in order to counter the frauds, exactly what they're doing to close these VAT leakages, they will then say, okay, you want to do VAT registration voluntarily, which is where a lot of fraud happens in the VAT systems. They will then say, okay, we want to come and inspect this particular business if it indeed it does exist. So they will send out the inspector to your premises. If you said you are a manufacturer, they want to come there and see this property being actually customized or conducive to be a manufacturing premises. But the challenge with that, and I understand where they're coming from, they were trying to close the gap from the VAT system. What we've seen in practice is that it has it increases the cost of doing business in a sense that when you submit an application for, say, for SMME, instead of taking you 21 working days to get your VAT registration sorted out quickly, that process takes longer, and we're hoping that some of this money that has been allocated to SARS will actually capacitate it to have more inspectors, because you find that they don't have inspectors out to go. Then what it does, it actually delays you to register in VAT. And it, instead of taking 21 working days or sometimes promptly getting a VAT registration immediately, that end up being a longer period. And you and I can agree that sometimes you find that you've got a business that you need to go into business with, a business that requires you to be VAT vendor. But because you're not VAT registered and you're still waiting for that process, but then you end up not being able to do that. But I also want to bring it home to business partner, or for that matter, even IDC has similar product. The challenge with that is that there are SMMEs that get funded to buy, say, a property. And then business partner or IDC will split your funding into VAT funding product, and then they'll split another one to buy, say, property. Now, if you're in a commercial space, you will want to recover that VAT as fast as possible so that the cost of that fund is actually reduced, so that when you recover that money from the system, you actually pay it back to business partner or IDC as an example. But then what happens is that if you are delayed, you and I can agree, if the VAT registration process is actually delayed, what does it mean? It means you're actually going to pay more money to the likes of business partner. I'm sorry, but Arnold, you're making money, but that adds to the cost of doing business. That's exactly what we're talking about. That adds cost of doing business. But another modernization that I need to see, which it also comes out in the budget speech documents. It's around the easing of port of entry. And why I'm going there, if you look at the numbers, we do not actually recover enough on the VAT side with regard to the input. The VAT that comes with you inputting items into the country. Yes, they're arguing that as a result of the economy not doing well, there's a nice story there. But however, there's also an issue of the lead times that comes with getting your products in, right? That has an impact on the VAT collection. But equally so, it has an impact on you doing business. And we're going to go into the details because I also want to later on touch on how that has an impact on manufacturing sector. Because now, let's say there's a delay at the port of entry and it takes you longer to get your product in, it means it's going to take you longer to deliver. And that on its own has an impact on job creation because if you're not selling your product faster, you're not turning the money quickly, but you already paid suppliers in China. So meaning that the money is already out, but your money that is coming back from into your pockets is actually takes longer. So that on its own, it's a cost of doing business, but equally so has an impact on the fiscus because they don't recover VAT collections as a result of the imported products quicker. So these are things that I hope that the money that has been allocated to the SARS will be sometimes channeled because it directly has an impact on SME sector. Maybe in closing, the last point that I want to add, bringing that, because why I'm bringing that linking to the port of entry because if you look at South African manufacturing sector, and actually earlier on, I was having a chat with one of the guys here. If you look at in the budget documents, and I need Matodenge to actually technically touch on that, there's a section there that allows you to actually accelerate depreciation if you are in a manufacturing sector. If you look at the numbers there, the uptake on the numbers, that's what we call, tax expenditures estimates. There's documents separately there, I think it's about 20 pages in the budget documents that speaks to that. If you track the last 4 years of that number, particularly on SMME sector, which is that section that I need Matotenge to explain to you guys on how it works. That number has been constant, meaning that it tells you a story about the SMME's market in relation to manufacturing sector. And I'm going back to the port of entry because that number, we need to be honest with us, is that number won't change or won't see much improvement in that number, mainly because the manufacturing sector is not supported. A lot of SMEs are now importing. So you've got a double sword that is against you, that you're not supported locally. You can't take advantage of certain tax reliefs that are there in the systems. Because if you say to me, go into manufacturing sector, buy items, then I'll give you accelerated depreciation, meaning that you can deduct depreciation for the manufacturing plant that you buy quicker than you would ordinarily do, which is immediately 100%. If you buy manufacturing machinery, say for 10 million, immediately that 10 million you can plug it into the system. But can you see, this is where you see some of the tax relief measures that gets to be put in the system. If they are alone not being supported, then we're just going around the cycles. But then equally so, then if you then decide, which I was speaking to one of the guys here, or the guys that, then they decide to import from let's say China. But then you've got lead time at the port of entry. So, there's that cost that you are running away from manufacturing the country and then taking advantage of these tax relief measures that are provided for in the tax legislation. they are counted by the lead times, the cost of doing business, because it's taking longer to do that. But equally so, it's not benefiting the system because they're not recovering that. I think we'll go into the details. Let me leave it there.
Thank you so much. That was a very comprehensive analysis. I think I'd like to encourage participation before I move on to the next topic. Do you, any of you have a question relating to the topics that we have touched on at this moment? Online, please share your questions as well. We will read them and answer them. Relating to the topics that we have touched on at this moment? Okay. Online. All right. So, okay, small technical glitch. It happens. But I want to go back to the topic on funding, access to funding. Mr. Shili is alleging that our business partner is charging us a lot of money. I'll say us because I'm also part of small business, I guess. But when it comes to funding, I mean, we know that it's actually a challenge in general for SMEs, Mr. Arnold. How do you think SMEs should go about in bringing efficiencies in their balance sheets or income statement that will allow them to be eligible for funding?
Testing. Testing 1, 2. All right. So I think firstly, Shirley boy, I have to correct you there. I have to correct you. So the cost of buying an asset is now a lot more for an entrepreneur. But a lot of funders, most funders, want you to cover that cost. So if you're buying an asset, you have to put on a 20% deposit and you have to pay the VAT. So all of a sudden, you're putting down 35.5% out of your cash flow. There are only a few institutions like business partners that seize the opportunity for you and are willing to take a risk and fund that VAT in the interim. Now, yes, there is definitely cost of funding the VAT of it as well. So the cost of funding and the cost of acquiring an asset is automatically more for you. That means as an entrepreneur, you're going to have to look at buying and getting more for your buck, all right? Buying what you need and comparing quotes with suppliers, and also look at what suppliers can add some value for you, maybe give you a discount on logistics or the installation of the equipment or training. And that is also an opportunity for you as a business owner. You now are you're at a disadvantage because your cost is more. So what can you do? You can add more value to your customer. Customers will pay for value. I am somewhat of a coffee snob connoisseur. I pay for premium coffee. If they add a half a percent on VAT, I'm still going to pay for my coffee. But I know that where I go for that specific product, I am getting value. And I think that is going to be one of the differentiators for small and medium-sized businesses. The other one is because of the cost of your input cost and your VAT cost, you have to rely on experts. You have to rely on an expert in tax, an expert in VAT. You have to get runners to do mundane work for you, whether it's running with going to municipalities to get approvals. You have to be more efficient in the way that you do business. And as an entrepreneur, you don't have to know everything, but you need to know people that know everything. And that is a very important aspect, and that is a successful trait of entrepreneurs that make it. They know that it's not just on them. They call in expertise. Yes, hold your team members and your professional team accountable, but you really have to leverage of those individuals. I think the last thing I want to say with systems and information, because I heard this, a lecturer told me once, at this information age, you're not allowed to be stupid anymore. I'm sorry for putting it bluntly. You can't. The information is available. So If you are struggling with cash flow, if you're struggling with efficiencies, there's individuals that can assist you, but you can also do your own research. Information is readily available. So it comes down to the entrepreneur being a lot more savvy in the way he or she runs their business, as well as being a lot more efficient in leveraging off skills from other individuals. I have, for example, a client in the room that appointed a turnaround specialist, and their business is thriving now because they leverage of those skill sets. And then also take responsibility of yourself for educating yourself on how to improve tax compliance, how to improve systems, how to improve your value added services to your clients, and how to work better with your suppliers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I'll rephrase what you meant by saying we can't be stupid. I'll say we can't be ignorant.
Thanks.
So I'm rephrasing the same thing. You can't be ignorant because there's so much information out there, information that can empower you and your business. And I think before I go over to Ms. Lusanda, picking up on efficiencies, I will acknowledge you just now say in your question. I want Ms. Lusanda to start thinking about practically what does it mean to be efficient as a small business, especially in township. I mean, you spoke about the fact that we are growing at around average of 1.8% versus China that is projecting, say, 5%. That's the reality of the matter. And we're going to stay on this low growth trajectories for a longer period. And that, I think, links to what Mr. Arnold is saying, to say we really need to be efficient and empower ourselves to be profitable. But before I give it to you, Ms. Lusanda, I would like to acknowledge the gentleman there. So please introduce yourself and your question. Do we have a speaker, a mic for the questions? All right, maybe you can use my mic. Oh, okay, we can hear you. Thank you, sir. I would like to give this question to Ms. Deshi.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
I like it when my audience are also experts on these topics. What's your name, sir? Please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Oscar Suga. I was supposed to be accompanied by the president of Santaco in this meeting, but unfortunately, or fortunately for all of us sitting here, he is meeting with the minister, with the executive of Santaco, to discuss these issues as well, from transport, public transport, and government perspective. So I'm not necessarily going to answer that question as Santaco per se, even if I do work with Santaco. However, as a taxi owner and operator with a fleet of taxis, to answer you very shortly, my business, my taxi operation business in 2024-25 financial year, I paid VAT of 821,000 rands, right? That's VAT. That's tax collected from my business. And that amounts to about 64,000 rands per month. And that then means that should be a cost item in my cash flow. So tax has been collected in our operation. In the previous financial year, we paid 644,000 rands in that financial year. Now, that's a 1.27% increase from year to year. Now, if I'm going to pay more VAT on top of that, you have to add that in. And in that period, we didn't increase the fares. to the staff that's going to come to your business and work for you. 4 years in a row, we didn't increase the fare. So your staff, I'm transporting it to your business, same cost, you understand? So you have to think what losses I'm incurring. Unlike the buses and the taxis, and the trains, I don't get a subsidy from government. So I think in summary, you may draw an understanding of where we stand and how much more. And look, at the end of the day, if you think about it as well, we are transporting, as the taxi industry, we are actually circulating money. And we're talking in a region of 21.8 billion rands per annum, which we are circulating ourselves of everybody who's a commuter. And what does that mean? Who pays us for circulating money in the economy? Nobody. So let me pause there at that point. and
Thank you so much. I concur that the taxi industry does have such a huge economical impact. And I'm hoping that within with the plans around making the road infrastructure safer, we will actually see a lot of our taxi operators putting measures to make sure that the commuters keep on being safe. I mean, when you look at especially the current incidents that have occurred on the road, obviously I'm not blaming the taxis, I'm not blaming the road infrastructure. I'm just saying that there's a heightened need for us to focus onto that. Okay, thank you. Ms. Lusanda, back to efficiencies in the township. Oh, you want to? Is there another question? Oh, okay. All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mpho. I'm from Saibib. The question that I really have covers the opportunity that you once gave us earlier on, but I was still going through it in my head. It's around the VAT. So in my understanding, when I look at it and the compromise that we're going to face as the property sector is about the raised cost of construction and the development costs. So my question really around that is, how do we as SMMEs try to cover the loss that we're going to be facing around that? And then also I am now moving to the part of municipalities, and with the understanding that there might not be any representative from municipalities, but how do we also start collaborating with municipalities based on the budget allocations that we have? Because if we look at the budget, the proposed one, it does give a significant amount to the raised amount, which only focuses on the utilities. That is mainly your water, your waste, and your electricity. But what are the municipalities offering to us as the SMMEs, or rather property developers? Do we get any incentives from the money that is proposed? Is it possible that we also try to shift this to also benefit the SMMEs instead of just the government entities? Because as Mam Lusanda was saying, what we also lack from municipalities is accountability. If we look at the sector now, there are so many property practitioners that are still disputing the property tax and rates all the time. Every month the collection is also poor, leading to dysfunctional property practitioners as well. So when we look at the budget, how do we make sure, or how do we even propose to make the budget not work for the municipal entities only, but also give back to the people that are putting in forward and a contribution towards our economic development? Because I believe that as the property sector, we do have a significant contribution towards the economic development. So if I just put it out there, this was not just mainly a question, but also an eye-opening statement that we might try to look at, especially if we're going to be commenting on the budget. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I'll let Mr. Chiliboy take the first question, and then Ms. Lusanda will weigh in on the efficiencies from municipality. I'm not sure if there's anyone who's representing municipality in the room. Yes, no? Okay, all right.
You're just applying to be fired. let me highlight something. There's these reforms called Operation Vulindlela. In that, they are on phase 2. And within that phase 2, one first priority there is around municipality. So there's a close monitoring on municipal accountability and ensuring that municipalities are capacitated, right? That's a noble thing. But I think also as SMME sector, we need to start saying, and which is something that I was privileged to be in what we call lockup program with National Treasury. So it's where the economists and the media people get to find the budget documents before the public. And one of the conversation I had with one gentleman from Section 27 was how they go about ensuring accountability. So what they're doing very well is that they'll take the budget and say, so and so figure is allocated for so and so. And then they go down into the ground and say, but you said 1 billion is going to go into eradicating pit toilets. Why that is not done? Where I'm going with this is, if you as the industry, as say SIBIB as an example, sorry, I see president of SIBIB is here. Thank you for coming. And if you as the body or as the so-called an SMME industry body, you also need to take upon yourself to ensure that, but you issued this proposal or the proposal was adopted around the accountability and things like that on the municipalities, and particularly how it has an impact on you guys, and is the priority of Operation Vulindlela as the biggest structural reforms that is implemented by the country, then you need to hold them accountable to ensure that that is being done. That's number one. Number two, on the vet side, there is a provision, and I think Matadang can also help me there. There's a section that actually gives you a relief, which is, I think, is section 18, capital D, if I'm not mistaken. It allows you to manage your cash flow as a property investor or developer, that you can temporarily let your properties if you feel that you've got a cash flow problems, because you would have paid, you and I can agree that you would have paid some form of VAT going around. But also, I think something that you also need to take into account is that VAT, it's give and take. So you just need to make sure that your processes are efficient enough such that whatever you are paying out is actually claimed in faster. But I need to agree with you on a point that I was discussing with one of the guys earlier was, if where the margins, and this is where I'm going to agree with you, that it's something that perhaps we need to keep raising, and the more we talk about these things, the more the right people, the policymakers will hear us one way or another. It's around the industries where the margins are too tight, such that even if there's a VAT increase, it becomes so complex that you can't even pass it on. And as a result, it ends up eating into the margins. That I'll agree with you. But however, there are certain measures and reliefs that you also, as the industry, you need to take it upon yourself to hold the government, those whom the decision makers, accountable. But rest assured that, the last part is actually, National Treasury is introducing, on the budget allocations, there's the amount that are given to the municipalities as grants, right? So they kind of increase and divided. I don't know if you guys saw that. I think even the minister mentioned that there's amounts that now are going to be based, particularly for metros, which is amazing. It's a new thing. The metros now, certain portion of the grant is going to be conditionally based. Now, some of the things there that were listed is around issues of governance, right? Now, you guys also, as the industry, I'm going to beg and pick on you because as the industry, then you need to take it upon yourself to say, hang on, what are the stats? What's going? Has there been any form of improvement? How much was given to Joburg? How much was given to Swan as the metro? That grant that is conditional on the performance and governance and the service delivery, because that's what the budget documents or project budget proposal, as I say, that those conditions are those. Then if there's money bill, a couple of millions that have been granted to the municipalities, then you need to say on what ground? You need to start making noise. On what ground, if Joburg was given 100 million for that particular grant, I'm looking at that line item because that's what impacts you. On what grant? Has there been any form of governance improvement as the money? Because that's what you said, National Treasury, that you're going to allocate this money on condition that the municipality improves on the governance. So that I'll leave it to you.
Thank you so much. I see that Mr. Arnold would like to weigh in further. Go ahead.
Right. Can you all hear me? So I'll project my voice. I think what it comes down to is for a small to medium sized business, there comes a point where you just feel squeezed and it affects your patronage. Nobody's running to SARS to pay tax, right? Nobody's happy about it, but you would be if the municipality was providing the service, the education, the health sectors, etc. If the infrastructure was there to to boost and bolster uh, businesses, small to medium sized businesses, people will, I would say, happy to pay tax because you see the results. So it comes down to that that patronage that you feel as an entrepreneur. But where Shelly Boy, where I agree with you is that as a small business owner, there are opportunities for you, especially because you referred to property in particular. There are opportunities for you to get off the grid or to finance your utilities efficiencies with solar, water reticulation. Business Partners, for example, has an energy fund. We got a green buildings fund. We're not the only institutions that do it, but you have to look at what alternatives are out there to bring the cost of running your business down. And yes, you are going to have to hold municipalities and your local authorities accountable. But I always say when you look at a problem statement, what can you affect? What can't you affect? And what can you affect indirectly? And start with the low-hanging fruit. How can you secure your property? How can you reduce your utilities? How can you make business easier? Bear in mind, there's a lot of countries that pay a lot more tax, that pay a lot more VAT, whose interest rates are 20% plus, where the cost of business there is a lot and there's a lot of uncertainty. And yet, SMEs, we expect of you to be the optimist, to come up with the solutions, to come up with the innovation. So it's a hard pill to swallow because it is a cost, a operational cost. But if we look at the challenge as an opportunity, there might be some things within your business, within your portfolio of clients, that you could do to make things better for you. Thank you.
Thanks. I think you asked me to answer the question of efficiency, and he's already touched on it partly in that I wanted to say in property, part of the thing that we see that people are starting to do is to provide these alternatives, solar, gray water, etc. But it's not cheap. It comes at an additional capital cost that most small businesses can't afford. I mean, we've worked it out in our business is that if you have less than 15 units that you can rent out, it's impossible almost to put in solar because the numbers just don't carry it. So that there are those realities to think about. But I think that there's always opportunity because you are an SMME and by nature you should be small. You are small and you should be nimble. And it's an expectation that we have that might not always be practical, but the truth is that you need to make sure that you are quick on your feet. I mean, in property, we say, at least for me, I don't believe there's this thing called passive income. You need to be hands-on in your operations. I was impressed by the gentleman from the taxi business having fingertip fluency as to his numbers of what he's paying for VAT this year and last year he could spit it out. Most businesses are not able to do this. You ask someone, you say, you are coming to be financed, what are your basic costs, fixed and the ones that are variable? People can't give you that information. So the ability, and I think that it's an opportunity, this increased compliance that is being proposed, that SARS should be pushing, is that it forces SMMEs to organize themselves better. Make sure that your paperwork is in place. Because, for instance, ourselves, if you don't have a tax compliance certificate, we won't find you. It's a simple fact. So I think that it forces us to be a little bit more organized, to be a bit more fluent in terms of our numbers, and know that information assists us to get financing quicker and better. And I think that in the speech, the whole idea that private partnerships or private-public partnerships will now be promoted and will be leveraged for the infrastructure spend is a good thing. But we all know that our government likes mega projects. So chances are there will be no space for SMMEs in that space. But it doesn't mean sit back and not try to see how you can subcontract to those big businesses that would be contracted by government to deliver on those infrastructure projects. There might be opportunities there for small business to participate. And I suspect that the ones that will be able to participate are the ones that are a little bit more organized than the next one. So it's how you make sure that you organize yourself for that. But, I was trying to listen hard in the budget speech about the transformation fund. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear the detail as to how that will be rolled out and how it will assist SMMEs. But that's also an opportunity. I mean, it was announced in the SONA, and if it happens, it's a good opportunity for people to tap into that. I'm trying not to answer the municipal question. The reality is that they are saying with these reforms, there will be performance-based allocations to the metros. This is a good thing. The issue is that who's going to make sure that that's enforced and municipalities feel the pain of that, because currently the municipalities are a law unto themselves. Because even if a small business can go and make all the noise that Chili Boy is saying, try to hold them accountable, it's a very one-way street. We've been doing it as a big business, trying to, pitch it as a collaboration, try to pitch it as a litigation, try to pitch it as a PR exercise to name and shame. They just don't feel any of this, and we've tried to bring Salga to the table. They're now starting to come and engage a lot more through Salga, and one hopes that this performance-based approach will then make our municipalities a little bit more responsive, a little bit more accessible even, because I think sometimes for small businesses, you can't even access them. You don't know who to speak to. And that's an issue. I mean, the issue around town planning processes in townships, you have a Res 1 zoning permission, and you are trying to rezone to something that will give you better scale in terms of density. It will take you at least 2 years to get an answer. This is a cost that a small business just simply can't carry. And what happens is that they then end up building without any compliances, without any approvals. And the infrastructure then gets overloaded because people are building without no one
without anyone making sure that there's compliance. So there is some, I think that as a country, unfortunately, we've gone on for too long with our municipalities. And most of us, I mean, I don't know what province is meant to be doing because I don't interact at a provincial level. Most of us interact at a local level with your municipality. You feel your pothole when it's on your road. You feel when the water is not available in your area or electricity is not accessible in your area. And if your local municipality is not responsive, it's a real problem. So I think that hopefully this performance-based thing will work. And I agree that we should now take the opportunity as small businesses, as citizens and business generally, to go to National Treasury now each time, interrogate those things and say, this is what you've allocated to City of Joburg, but we haven't seen improvement in 1, 2, and 3, and we want you as National Treasury to account publicly how you decided that that allocation was deserved. I think it will be up to us. I mean, most of us, we don't even go to these IDP processes because it's a show. You go in there, you try to contribute, and you don't even know where that input has gone to. It just doesn't get implemented. But I think we shouldn't get exhausted, because the reality is that for a property investor, the administered prices that come out of municipalities are making it impossible sometimes to afford running these schemes successfully. I see that they have now increased the number of households that can get the free basic services. Hopefully that improves affordability for housing generally, and also the zero rated items, food items, have also been increased slightly, and hopefully that releases some cash for households to afford their rental or their bond repayments. But that is to be seen as to how it translates in society. But the reality is that property can be a very marginal business. And because it's very marginal, you need to be hands-on. It's not passive. You need to know what's happening. You need to know that I'm raised by a taxi owner. And we never we never knew how much VAT because we didn't pay any. It's the truth. So, it's nice to see that the sector is maturing. So I think it's us just taking those opportunities. Thank you.
Me? Okay. Thank you so much, Miss Lusanda. That was a heaped response, but I love it very much. You touched on a couple of points. One, points around businesses being efficient within, I guess it will be pretty much things that are within their control. And then there's also an element on things that are outside of their control. There's a huge dependency on, for example, stakeholders like municipality. I just want to probably throw it back to the audience to say, for efficiencies that businesses can bring about in their own businesses, within their control that is, how do they go about it practically? I mean, I like your business acumen, sir. Well done. And I'm not judging taxi owners or anything like that, but I know that literacy is still something that is not big, especially in the township businesses. How practically do small businesses empower themselves? Because sometimes you know what you know, and they're so small, they're so busy, they don't even have a lot of money to get consultants. What are the practical steps that someone who is with us now can implement like tomorrow to empower themselves? Anyone?
Morning, everybody. My name is Pierre Jacobs. I'll answer the question if I can ask one back. Good. I think what's important for the business owners is you need to understand your financial and your non-financial numbers. You cannot do anything, you cannot make any decisions unless you have that detail. And I think the panelists have indicated that very, very few, because that's the business that I do, as I support SMEs, one part of my business in that role. Is you'll be alarmed. I'd venture to say 75% of them do not have a handle on their financial information, but also the non-financial information and where those two meet. Because you need to understand your trends, You need to understand the projections, etc. But it's only when you have that powerful tool of combining the two, so you can see what is your diesel price, let's just say per truck that's running. How far do they run? Why does one all of a sudden run further than the other? Is there fraud? We recently bought a business where we saw someone was basically 2 million rands of diesel was stolen in the prior year just because they were not close to their numbers. They didn't understand how far every truck was going, how much diesel was put in, because they were running it on a very informal, unstructured basis. You don't need specialists to do that, but you need a good accountant that can give that to you so you've got real-time information. And as I said, the key thing for me is bring the non-financial information into play, have formal meetings on a monthly basis. Now, it sounds very simple, but they just don't do it. Have your monthly EXCO meeting where you put all of this on the table, you discuss it with the people around you, and then decisions are made from there. It's just not happening, and it's not very difficult. It's not expensive. You really don't need specialists. Maybe a month or two just to help you to get there. But then you need to run it. Then it's discipline. Because now you cancel the meeting on Monday because, there's something else that comes up. And you don't sit down and discuss and analyze your business. I hope that helps a little bit. I want to ask a question back to the panel. Given that South Africa's projected economic growth or GDP growth, it's 1.8%, which is one of the lowest on the continent. We've got around about 35% of unemployment. Is there anything new in the budget that supports the start of new businesses and the growth of the current SMEs in our country? Thank you.
Okay, so I'll come in from a tax perspective. So these two provisions are not necessarily something that is new, but they were included in the budget proposal because they've been extended. So I'll take, for example, in spaces where there's innovation and there's a bit of research and development that is happening there. So there is an incentive that is available for any, I'm going to call it any new knowledge or research or development that is being put out there. You do have businesses that operate within the technology space, and we've seen that over a number of years there has been growth in those areas. And so when you're looking at something at that incentive, you are then able to get a deduction of your full investment that you've made towards that innovation, and over and above that, you are then able to get an additional 50% of that cost as a deduction. So that does make quite a significant contribution towards reducing the amount of tax that you can then pay as a result of the business that you're doing. So that's the first one I would mention. The other incentive I would mention is that if you are in the manufacturing space, of course, and this is not something that is new again, as part of your decision of capital allocation is to look at the accelerated tax allowances if you are a manufacturer. Because as a small business corporation, if you invest in a new manufacturing plant, let's say it's a plant that is 10 million or 5 million, you are able to claim that cost immediately in that year that you invested in that plant. Again, it does significantly reduce your tax burden for that year. And I suppose it's as part of your capital allocation decision, that's something that has to be taken into consideration. The last thing to then mention is that if you're looking at energy efficiency, there's quite a bit of talk around being more energy efficient and reducing the amount of energy that we are using as businesses. There is a Section 12 capital L energy efficiency incentive that is available to businesses. I speak top of my head, I think it's around 90 cents per kilowatt of energy saved that you can then claim if you put in place initiatives that result in the reduction of the use of energy in a business. Okay. There isn't a lot that has been put out, of course, in the budget speech, but those are just the three things I can think of top of my head that should make a difference in terms of giving back to businesses and making it and assisting them in growing the businesses.
I think maybe just to add quickly, there's also an allocation of about over 300 million for micro, medium, and small hubs that are going to be created. So there's also that. I think that is something new that I've seen in the budget documents. And over and above that, there's 2.1 billion that has been earmarked for township businesses. I think they're targeting about 120,000 township businesses. So that to me, it's something that is more targeted and easily can hold them accountable for that.
Anyone would like to weigh on this one before we move on? I think if
Maybe
okay,
just
sure.
one last thing.
You go, Matt.
And we've seen National Treasury highlighting this fact that in the past they have introduced, I'm going to call it different tax regimes specific for SMMEs. One, defining certain businesses as micro businesses, okay, and as well as defining other businesses as small business corporations. What National Treasury has seen is that actually there isn't that much of an uptake of these tax regimes, and unfortunately, taxpayers are not benefiting from the intended purpose of these tax regimes. You know, if you're to look at the small business corporation, you know, you're not getting taxed at the similar rate to a normal business, which is at 28%, but your tax is progressive. So the lower the amount of profit that you are making, the lesser tax that you're paying. And of course, as you are growing as a business, that's when your tax then goes up and goes much closer to the rate of 27% of corporate tax. So there are certain pockets that you can look at as a business and as an SMME to try and see where can you get those marginal tax savings. Yes, it's not going to change the world, but I think when you put these marginal savings together, it does make a difference to the business.
Thank you so much. Oh, good, Ms. Mone, answered. I mean, I spoke about elements that are outside of our controls as SMEs, very government dependent. So I think, if anything at all, GNU has taught us that speaking as a collective has a power somehow. I think for the first time, we engage so much on budget before it is signed off by Parliament. So I think the question for me to my panelists or anyone on the floor is, how much positioning does SMEs do? What I mean by that is to tackle these elements that Ms. Lusanda, for example, has highlighted around inefficiencies in municipality. So we can wait for government to hold them accountable through performance management. I don't know how long are we going to wait for that to happen, but then we can also take some action, deliberate action, to say we want to hold our government accountable. How do you see that movie panning out? Anyone? Especially in the township, how do you guys collect yourself to be one voice or to come up as one voice? I mean, when you look at even banking sector as an example, they have banking associations where banks as a collective, they tackle the key imperative topics that they would like to see change happening. Do we have such structures in for SMEs?
Yeah, we do in Cape Town have what they call the Township Developers Forum. So it's a forum where the micro developers who invest in townships get their voices heard and kind of coordinate their issues to take all the way up to the mayor and the bureaucrats in the metropolitan council there. And you know, we always say that Cape Town is better run municipality than most, but I'm afraid to say it's the truth. You know, they are better run. So through that, we are seeing that there is some progress being made in trying to reform the town planning and land use processes in Cape Town. The mayor is in fact himself championing this thing and going to townships and having those conversations and being heard. But also Cape Town has a sort of old civil society grouping through DAG, Development Action Group, and Isandla Institute. And those two NGOs are old and are experienced in sort of pushing for issues that affect communities. So I think that their involvement also in the process, and obviously including ourselves as private sector, just getting together with those groupings to advocate for changes. Cape Town has listened a little bit more quicker than we have experienced, unfortunately, in Ekurhuleni and City of Tshwane, and perhaps a little bit in Joburg. City of Tshwane and Ekurhuleni, I suspect it's more the issues of coalition governments that they were grappling with in recent months that has just made them almost unavailable to have these conversations. But as I said earlier, we are starting to see SALGA. I mean, just in this year alone, there have been 3 interactions with SALGA that I've been involved with that has been led by them trying to listen to private sector and to listen to communities, especially on issues around township development, etc. And also the Premier in Gauteng makes the necessary noises about reforms and township economic development policies, etc. And it remains to be seen where those will go. But at least you're starting to see the right noises. I mean, even in the budget speech and the SONA, the whole idea of efficient and inclusive urban economies came out. And obviously that aligns with all our intentions, because if our urban areas are not able to be functional and grow economically, unfortunately our rural areas will feel the pain of it, because urban areas must lead in that conversation. But as I say, maybe I'm a little bit, I've been doing this for almost 25, maybe more years. And the conversations have always been one-sided, unfortunately, where government is concerned. I'm hoping that now that you're starting to see, I mean, on last Friday, we were having the conversation with the president and the mayor and the premier with this engagement around Joburg and what needs to be done. And he was saying the right things about what he thinks is necessary. Obviously, we have the G20 coming. I don't know whether it's because of that, but he did say that it's not because of that, that there's intention for these efforts to continue. The private sector has been very active in trying to manage inner cities, for instance, that are simply falling apart. And we simply can't have that as a country, because that's a core of your economy. If the city of Joburg or Johannesburg itself fails, the whole country fails, because it's the economic hub of South Africa, so-called gateway to Africa. We can't be a gateway to Africa if we can't do the basics right. So for me, I think that the issues around, and I'm sorry I'm sounding negative, but I'm trying not to be negative, because I am seeing that there is some right language starting to come out, and we have to leverage on that right language. We have to keep them honest and accountable to the things that they're promising. When I say them, I mean government, from the president all the way to the mayors and the administrators. I always make the point that we tend to focus our issues on politicians as a country, try to get the mayor to answer, the MMCs, the premiers, etc. We forget that we pay executives who run city entities and we never hear them and their voices. We want the CEO of City Power coming out and talking to us about what's happening with electricity issues, the CEO of Joburg Water, the CEO of Pick It Up. Why are we having such an issue of dumping in the city? The CEO of JRA. Why, when Joburg Water goes and fixes a broken pipe, it takes JRA 3 months to a year to fix that that road? You will have an opening for almost a year of a pipe that was fixed until it breaks again because it's been left open, and nobody ever sees these executives coming and explaining what's, because maybe if we understood what the issues are, maybe we'll be able to collaborate better with them to try and solve to solve these issues together. But sometimes, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I never really have a feel of it. I never really have a feel of where are these guys who are the ones being paid a salary to run these things. They're almost in the background somewhere. So I think that we need to surface them. We need to start saying, let's have the conversations with the people who are the doers of the things that we want to see happening. I mean, we are afraid to talk about unions, for instance, as a country. But if you look at city of Joburg, SAMU has a role in this, in that, what are they saying to their workers who are not delivering on services, who don't show up at work? I mean, go to Tuso House and you try to dispute a billing issue. These guys are on their phones, on WhatsApp, and nobody's giving you attention. I'm using that as an example. And there's just simply, it feels like there's no accountability. And you sit there, you say, why do they feel they can get away with it? It's because they'll go to their union and it might defend this thing. I don't know. But at the engagement with the president last week, the speaker from SAMU was as frustrated as us about the issues that are happening. So I'm hoping that there's starting to be a shift in the system as to what needs to be done and who needs to be in the table to have these conversations. But I think as a country, we need to say we can bear this no longer, because we just simply can't go on like this. We can't go on pretending that things are not falling apart when they are. So for me, I think that's, sorry, I'm not a tax person, so I'm talking about generic issues.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lusanda. I mean, I think if I can point out a few takers from what you have said is the conversation is happening, but it needs to be cascaded down to certain levels, right? At this stage, at a very high level, so it needs to be brought down. And also, I always say, I mean, I think most of us will say, talk is cheap. So we need to talk probably less and act more. But most importantly, to your point, hold those people accountable that are supposed to be saving us. Before I go to the hand on the floor, I just want to quickly go back to you, Ms. Shannon. You spoke about tax leakages and wastage. Practically, how can the government and us, what role can we play in order to make sure that we assist in that those leakages that you have spoken about?
So when it comes to the role of businesses and SMEs in aiding SARS and government to enhance compliance and enhance collections, it's obviously highly dependent on the tools and the platforms that they make available to us. So I suppose at the very basic level, it's just ensuring that, your registrations are valid, that your filings are all up to date, and that you're sending everything in on time. And I suppose just speaking to those around you as well and acting as examples when it comes to administering and taking part of compliance. What I would say as well is when it comes to tax policy, okay. I seem to always be the one who's got the problem with the mic. But anyway, when it comes to modernization and digitization efforts on part of SARS, this is always an evolving landscape. And it is up to all of us to make sure that we're keeping up to date with what are the different modernization objectives that they have in place and how we can ensure that we're staying compliant. Now, there's obviously also it's a two-way street. There's a responsibility on SARS and government as well to make sure that adequate resources and education resources are made available to us, that there are no gray areas, that we understand exactly what we need to do. But I think it's about having that conversation always ongoing that ensures that everyone involved has that clarity needed.
Thank you so much. And I agree. I mean, tax and regulation, it can be complex for some of us, right? So that education component, it's so important that SARS will need to empower us so that we can actually comply more, hopefully. There was a hand at the back. Yes, please, sir, you can go.
Thank you. My name is Kapei wa Patlamhlaka. I'm from Transnet Property. I wanted to comment and to add to what Lusanda has been talking about. but also to answer the question of whether do we have a voice, or should I say an organized voice, that will hold accountable the government. And to a certain extent, I don't think we do have, because, and I'll talk for the city of Johannesburg as an example, because I think now we started operating the city of Johannesburg a lot. We have organizations that I think it depends on who in the organization can call who around the table. Then when you do that, you start seeing things happen. And I can say so because as Transnet Property, we called on the Premier, we called on the MEC of DID and COCTA, we called on the Mayor, and we have a forum now where we're able to talk to them. And the reason we had to do that is because we taking Transnet back to the CBD. The head office of Transnet, effective the 1st of April this year, will be at 96 Risick Street. We just invested over 500 million in redeveloping, refurbishing an over 100-year-old building into a new head office of Transnet, and we are building a package as well. But we got so frustrated in that process. We should have been in that building last year, but we're only going to the building this year because of the frustration that we're experiencing. I don't think as South Africa we have a money problem. In fact, to be honest, even the VAT increase, we don't need it. We don't have a money problem in South Africa. We've got an accountability problem. Because the executives, as Lusanda says, I can tell you now, even being called in a meeting where the Premier is there are some HODs that don't pitch. CEOs of entities of the city of Johannesburg just don't pitch. We've got that problem. Now, I think as a country and as citizens, we definitely need that voice. It should not be because Transnet calls the Premier, everybody runs in to want to address the issues that have been dealt with there. Now, agree with Lusanda as well. If the city of Johannesburg fails, the whole country will fail. We've got CIDs in the city of Johannesburg. What do the CIDs do? Recently, there is a formation, and I think it's led by the guys, Josie My Josie. We need the operators, the property owners in the city of Johannesburg to come into a forum where we can together hold our executives to account. Because if we don't, the risk of the failure of the city of Johannesburg is an increase in rates and taxes, is increase in city power electricity, in increase in water and all sorts of things. And what do they do to the SMMEs? They kill the SMMEs, and in fact, development becomes impossible in the city of Johannesburg. Now we need a voice. We need property developers. We need SMMEs and all other operators. If we are going to avoid misadministration, it is when we can come together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I agree. People need to be held accountable, but I'm not sure how are we going to go about that quicker. Ms. Lusande spoke about speed. Speed is so important. We need to act with speed. The dialogue conversations are not going to move us forward. But I think there are 3 hands that I'm going to take before I take the virtual question.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I just want to go back to the question of leakage. My understanding is that the e-marketing business is worth over, in 2023, 71 billion. But the informal side of it can't be tracked, and it's very significant. How can SARS, through this allocation, enhance its instrument to access that? I mean, we watch on a daily basis how are the people who are selling Abo Forever products buying million rands of houses and whatever, and surely they're not paying tax. And money is going to their bank accounts on a daily basis, of course, And I don't know what the role of the banks should be in terms of the KYC.
So you're not wrong with regards to the informal sector and what happens there. With regards to the tax leakages that do happen within that sector, there are developments within SARS like VAT modernization, where there's going to be greater visibility over businesses' invoices and businesses' transactions. And what the beauty is with that and with businesses' transactions is there's always a two-way check on what actually happens. What I mean there is that for every buyer, every seller in a transaction or generator of an invoice, there's the recipient of that. And for everyone who has to pay that on a certain transaction, there's a certain party that's taking in that invoice as an input and wants to claim that VAT back. Okay. So what VAT modernization intends to do is essentially that for every transaction and invoice that a business generates, all right, they have to they no longer just have to do the aggregated VAT return once every month, once every 2 months, but rather every time they're making a transaction, the plan is for that underlying data to actually get sent to SARS and through their systems get validated. Now, the question that might then arise then is, well, why would the informal sector necessarily do that? What's going to compel them to do that? Well, the reason is they're selling to other businesses or other entities who wish to claim their VAT back. Their invoice is not going to be valid unless they are going through that system. So there is a bit more of a challenge when it is in the informal sector or businesses where it's going to the end consumer and you don't necessarily have that refund interaction taking place. But really what the beauty is that, for every transaction, as I said, there's a two-part, there's a check on me and there's a check on you. So you can't necessarily be in this area where you're doing invalid transactions because the person who's purchasing from you is going to have a problem on their side when it comes to claiming their VAT back.
On the social media, I then would buy it and send the money directly to his or her account. She doesn't have to claim, and there's no VAT or whatever that probably she has because she's recouping her cost of going to China, going to Turkey, and then she's selling me. And I guess probably the role here is for the banks, because if on a monthly basis there's an income of 50,000 coming from those sales, I need to account. And maybe that's where the collaboration should be between SARS and the bank in terms of tracking those incomes that are going to those personal bank accounts, which are not registered with SARS because it is my personal bank account. But I also want to touch on something, Lusanna, that you mentioned that actually bothers me, especially in the township, when I'm walking around in my own area and in town, and the people that were paying to clean the streets are sitting down, literally with the tools that they are supposed to be. And when they want an increase, they make the cities and the township dirtier because some is going. And I guess it boils down to the level of lawlessness that we've seen in the country in the past 11 years or more, because that boils down to that there is such a high level of lawlessness and lack of accountability in our country.
So maybe, just to start off with addressing the first part of your question, and actually you can also jump in to help me on certain aspects as well. What you're speaking about is a great problem, which is a lot of people who should be VAT registered are not, and the lack of registration, and that costs SARS a significant amount of money each year. What they are trying to do in terms of picking up on that is they have implemented certain AI-powered programs, and whether those integrate with banks or not, I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure, but it would probably be a good idea to be looking into that, just given the fact that, you can ping when a large transaction or a large amount of money is coming into a person's bank account. That should be pinging that there should be some sort of tax implication that's going on there. I'm not sure.
Let me So, to answer your question, SARS as a unit, currently they started actually picking up on those, such that they created a unit called High Net Worth Individuals Unit. They're starting with the high net worth. So, what they do within that unit, there's what we call revenue augmentation. So, they can easily just go into your bank account system. Exactly, there's that collaboration between the banks and SARS. They can see the credit amount that came into a bank, and then they will pull the bank statement, and then they'll send it to you and say, please explain this amount. Because when we reconcile with what you declared to SARS, it's not making sense. So that is happening, that is done. It's actually very aggressive right now, what we call revenue augmentation. It's a lot, and it actually support when the minister spoke about the increase in the disputed cases that they're seeing increasing. It's actually, if we're being honest, it's around that. And also that number that they're mentioning, that there are people with economic activity, but not being registered in the what do you call, in the SARS system. It's exactly that. They identify them through revenue augmentation, because the banks are actually compiled or obliged to make the system available for SARS to zoom in your bank account.
Thank you so much. Before I move on to the hands, I just want to say something around that point of the bank playing a role. They will continue to play a biggest role, but also I was having a chat with a friend of mine who is running a small business. He was telling me that because of the tax and the collaboration between the banks and the SARS, as an example, he actually now accepts only cash for his business. So those are the kind of maybe inefficiencies that you are seeing or will continue to see, and there's no accountability. But also, just to come to your point around seeing people on the street with the tools and not doing anything, I think for me, it warrants a bigger discussion to say, as communities, what's preventing us from holding those people accountable? They sit in our communities, we see them, we pass them. We know they're supposed to be cleaning the streets. We know that our tax money goes towards paying them. Oh, good to you, mommy. We love that. Okay, cool. Next question. I think we are going to be closing in the next 5 minutes. So I'm going to take final questions before we close.
Thank you. I think this is going to be my last contribution. So just to maybe get everybody to be clear, business people, especially in the taxi industry, and I've been in the taxi industry for a while now, are more savvy and more learned than we know them to be. I'm sure Sis Lusanda would agree. And some of us have taken a posture of diversifying our businesses. For instance, we're involved in property, we're involved in all kinds of other businesses. And we do this because a lot of in the transport industry, a lot of our costs are grudge costs, like your cost of fuel and your cost of tires. You can't run a vehicle without a tire. You can't run your vehicle without a fuel. You can't run, and these are grudge products. You're not happy buying these things, but you have to. However, all these tax talks and issues and all of that, the frustration to us, I think is the same or can be linked to the same notion of why the advocacy groups such as OUTA went out on e-tolls, for an example. The cost of financing the collecting of tax versus the tax collected. How would it be making sense that I'm going to pay an X amount and 50% of that goes to the cost of collecting that money? It makes absolutely no sense, and it's frustrating to us. And a lot of us, for instance, myself, I wake up every day at 4 a.m. At 5 a.m. and I'm already communicating with my drivers, ensuring, and I'm at executive level, I'm not even at operational level. and I'm making sure that the business is operating efficiently. And I sleep at 12 midnight, but I have to be already operational at 5 a.m. Now you expect me again to be chasing these issues that are beyond our control. A lot of these things are in my control. I need to make sure that I do everything I can in the taxi operation. But however, in order to somehow, make it, I have to diversify. And not to say those other businesses are not going through their own issues as well. For instance, because I do a lot of transporting for students, scholar transport, so I ended up getting into student accommodation. And I can tell you today, we are busy fighting with NSFAS, the payment, the registering of the students to get into our res. It's a nightmare, and this is beyond our control. And we have to fight these things, and we're losing money in the process. We're already mid to end of March now, and we 1,000 capacity bed accommodation, and we only have 0.2% of what we're supposed to be getting. So, but our operation continues to accrue costs like our electricity and. So, really, honestly speaking, what is in our control versus what is not in our control. For me, honestly speaking, that should be 5%. That should be 5%, not even 14% for that matter. Thank you so much.
Fair point. Thank you so much. There was a last hand. Yeah, over there.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tsepon Jona. I represent a company called Africa Business Excellence, and we focus on leadership and governance. I think this is more of a comment than a question, right? I think there's a lot of interchangeable parts that we need to think about when we look at the SMME context, right? So we talk a lot around fixing the efficiencies, we talk around profitability, we should also be talking about sustainability, right, of those businesses. But what we find interesting is that, for instance, when someone registers an organization, they get conferred upon them the title of director. So directorship, which comes with a lot of obligations with that, fiduciary obligations, etc., and so forth. So yet there's no qualifying criteria of being a director. So we think some of the things or the areas that should be looked at is empowering SMMEs from inception. So when you register a company, sort of understanding those implications around being a director, what it means, etc., and so forth. And then looking at governance in the sense of demystifying it, right? So there's this notion that governance is for companies of a specific size, but it's a matter of actually putting together organizational design systems that can ensure you can oversee and manage your organization. One of the hardest parts or the difference, I'd say rather, is a comment of private and public, and someone talks about accountability, is a consequence. So as a business, the consequential management or outcomes for me is loss of clients, which is loss of income. Whereas public sector, the consequences thereof are not as punitive, right? So therefore, they don't see why they should drag their feet. For me as a business owner, if I don't cut it, I don't offer value, I'm competing with people, I have no clients. So I have to ensure that I offer value. So I think that that's one of the areas, and I think it ties in with one of the gentlemen that spoke about the educational side. So our focus is to inform, educate, and empower, because we believe if you're not well informed, you can't be educated enough to make empowered decisions for sustainability. So we try and demystify some of the stuff. One of the panelists spoke about the tax provision opportunities that SMMEs can exploit. How many of them know about it? So the informing, educating part is very, very important. And sort of taking some of these complex ideas which are pertinent and getting them to tie them to the business owner. Because if I understand as a director what my obligations are, what the consequences thereof, why it's important for me to look at tax and some of the opportunities that are there, the compliance side becomes much easier rather than being seen as a grudge purchase or sort of a niggly play that I have to deal with. So it was just that comment there.
Okay, thank you so very much. I appreciate the comment. It's quite powerful. I am going to close off the session now, but we will still be around if there's further questions. With that said, I would like to invite my panel to say their closing remarks. I mean, I think we can all agree that there's quite a lot that we need to do in order for us to move forward. I'll start with you, Ms. Lusanda.
Okay, thanks. I was seeing a hand there. You're not taking it. Huh?
Should I take it? Okay.
Company called Property Sales Machine. Okay, quickly, I'll say I like the question that the gentleman asked here about what new things did we see in the budget proposal, I suppose, that we thought would be good for the SMMEs. I would like to maybe bring forth things that I would have loved to have seen. I didn't see these things, and I loved what Mr. Shiliboy also said to say if we also maybe the more such conversations we have, the solutions will maybe go up until they reach the policymakers so that some of the ideas can be implemented. Quickly, I think the VAT increase idea is not a good idea because it puts more pressure on the consumer that is already overburdened. And I think how government thinks of it is if you increase VAT, obviously you can do all these social things and all these other things that they do. But part of the problem why we have to have the social grants is because of the high taxes. Let me explain it quickly. If you go to Proticlan in Soweto, right, you'll find a brand new house for 1.3 million. This is entry-level standard house, 1.3 million if you're buying a brand new house. Now, in order to buy that house, you need to be earning 45,000 rands, right? Gross income. Now, not many people in the country earn 45,000 rands a month. Right now, what government then does is you increase VAT, which means the already burdened consumer can't buy that house anymore because the house is now too expensive given all the other expenses that they have to pay. Now, what does government? Well, now what must the developer do? The developer is then forced to take cheap labor. That is sadly, in most instances, foreign nationals to try and cover the high expense, right? That they now have to cover, right? In order to continue selling that house. Now, I'll try and wrap this up quickly. Now, what that means is government, because they've increased the VAT, the consumer can't afford to buy the house. Now the consumer must go back to government and apply for FLISP or first-time finance because why? I'm not in the bracket that allows me to buy that property. Now government must give the money for free to the person that would have actually bought the property themselves and financed it themselves if the property was cheaper, if the tax was a bit lower on the VAT side. Now that's the one thing.
Mr. Kumalo, I'll need you to wrap up.
Okay, I'm wrapping up. Last two things. Border gates, because I'm trying to bring quick solutions that will not cost government a lot of money. If government were, instead of taking the soldiers to DRC, were to rather use the same soldiers to guard our borders, I think we'd be in a better position. And I'm an African, I love my fellow brothers and sisters. The only reason why I say that should be done is because, this last point, right, is because if you have someone who comes from a country where the cost of living is 10% or 20% of this country's cost of living, they will obviously take the cheaper wage. It's not because they are bad people or anything. It's logical. If I was given that opportunity, I'll take it too, right? If I could go next door, I'll take that opportunity. But if we were to just close the borders, then we'd have better circulation.
Okay,
not
cool.
The borders,
thank you so much, Mr.
Yes,
Kumalo. Thank you. I need to close. All right, Ms. Lusanda, closing remarks.
No, thank you. I think to obviously Shili Boy and tax education and business partners for the forum. I think it was an important conversation to have. So thank you for the invitation. I think that for me, just to summarize, is that I think, Mr. Kumalo, they start to talk about the geopolitics that we're starting to see with Trump or President Musk and Trump. The two of them, I can't decide who's, doing. Most countries are now starting to look inwards and try to see what they can do for themselves. This calls on us as a country to say you can't sit back anymore as a citizen or as a business in South Africa and not participate in the conversations that take the country forward. So the idea of active citizenship, we don't take that up enough. And one day we are going to wake up. I have a son almost finishing his final year at varsity. Where is he going to work? This question bothers me, and then what happens is that you then start trying to think, can I employ him where I am? But you can't do that because there's another child who's not related to you, who's probably more skilled. And if we're not thinking about these questions seriously as citizens, and we're starting to see business and communities starting to be more engaged in trying to clean their own communities, etc., we don't have passports that will allow us to just move to America. I think Trump has said he's going to take the Afrikaner farmers. Most of us who are not Afrikaner farmers, we have South Africa is the only country, for instance, I have as a person. So I'm really appealing to all of us to say, we can joke about these things, but we have to make sure that we play our role as active citizens to question these things and not be afraid to question them. I like what the lady was saying when she sees the workers from, Pick It Up or wherever sitting and not working. She says she questions them. Most of us don't. We just ignore it when we complain in the sidelines. The more of us who start saying this far and no further, the better the country, I think, will be, because we're now not leaving our future in the hands of politicians. Politicians are there, yes, to play their role. They have an important role to play, but their role can be bigger than us as citizens who employ them, who have given them the opportunity to lead. We have to hold them accountable. For me, that's the message. It doesn't matter what budget you put together. If the fundamentals are broken, you will every year be trying to make a frog a fish or a fish a frog, because you're trying to make things balance that just naturally are not balancing because the fundamentals are broken. I think we need to go back to basics as a country. If you're saying you're going to pick up rubbish as pick it up on a Thursday, pick it up on a Thursday. If you don't, you better know that that community is going to give you noise and they will not let you get away with it. Same with, everyone else, roads agency, potholes, etc. We take this for granted, but it speaks about tires. If you have to drive on tires every day and broken robots, firstly, it reduces your speed to get to business, to what you need to do, because you have to navigate a pothole and a broken robot. These are basic things, but they are serious things. And if we can get those basics fixed, my view is that this country can succeed because we have enterprising people and enterprising businesses that will be able to take us forward, because employment can't be created by government. The public sector is far too bloated currently, and the wage bill is something we don't talk about. But it's a big cost, and the reason it's like that is that government feels that it has to extend this patronage and keep people in jobs because it has to remain relevant. But we can show them that if you fix the basics, we as the public sector, or private sector rather, can play the role of being job creators, of moving income around in the country. He says he transports and circulates money in the country on a daily basis. It's the truth. SMMEs have a big role to play, but they won't be able to play it if the regulatory systems don't allow for ease of doing business. So I think we need to make the noises, be active in saying to government, just open up our ability to do business. And we are here to make sure that the country works. I think for me, that would be my message.
Thank you, Mr. Madodange. I got it right this time.
Yeah. I think for me, I suppose the highlight for business around taxes is, you need to find partners that will enable you to exploit the opportunities and that are available to you as business people. Yes, it might look like a cost initially, but I think we also need to think of the return that you're able to get from that investment that you make in ensuring that you get the right partners who provide the right advice to you. Thank you.
So first of all, I'd like to start off by commending everyone in this room for taking the steps to come today and explore what the different elements of the budget impact you and impact your business and impact the country. I certainly myself have learned a lot today as well. And I think it's quite incredible because I think majority of people who consider themselves relatively informed will probably be able to point to the very big highlight items of the budget and not necessarily know all those different elements that actually would have an impact on our businesses and would be things that we can take advantage of. So I just would like to say I think that's quite great that we're all here doing that here today. I think it's also just important to highlight the fact that it's important to be aware of these things because that empowers ourselves. And not only that, how it empowers ourselves individually and our businesses. But I think what's something everyone in this room has pointed out quite a lot throughout today is, we're not acting alone. We act within an ecosystem, and how these policies impact the country and impact all the elements that we interact with, in turn impacts ourselves as well. So to be educated on all these different things and know the different courses of action that are available to you, I think is super important. I think when it comes to things, we've spoken quite a lot about the tax increases, the VAT increase in particular. And there's been obviously a lot of conversation of whether this is the right move or not. I think something that's quite important to take away and what maybe could be a good wake-up call for us all to take home is that often when government does make the choices to do things like an increase of VAT or increase in tax increases, while sometimes these things might have their reasons behind it, it's often something that's a short-term fix. And what I mean by short-term fix is you're going to see some sort of an immediate impact by increasing rates. Naturally, some sort of revenue increase is going to happen there, even if it's not to the extent that they're looking at. But I think what that really starts to highlight is really the importance of looking at our systemic problems, whether it's with infrastructure, whether it's with compliance. These are things that can have a much greater impact rather than simply increasing taxes and increasing rates. But they are long-term projects. And therefore, it is something that requires government and all of us to be taking a long-term view on and really seeing how we can have those greater impacts.
Thank you so much, and to the panelists and everyone who came here. I think for me that I'm looking forward to that we'll be monitoring very closely, it's around the working of SARS. We'll want to ensure that what we want to see is the reductions in the turnaround around the dispute cases there. I think that's one area that with allocated budgets, would like to see that. But I also want to clarify something that I said earlier around the issue of the cost that entrepreneurs end up paying to business partners. What I meant there was that because of the inefficiencies that as a result of SARS taking longer to get one to be registered as a VAT vendor, then it takes you longer to be owing business partner, then effectively you're going to be paying more. It's not that business partner charges more, right? But it's because it took you longer to get the whole process sorted out. I wish Arnold was here. So, but anyway, thank you so much. And yeah, I think it was a great session. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much. In closing, key takeouts, we need to hold the government accountable. We need to find partners who can help us exploit opportunities. Awareness is very key. And as I always say, in other setups, budget sets the stage, but it is really our strategies and responses that determines the economic realities. Thank you so much to business partners for sponsoring the breakfast. Thank you to Tex Edu for having us and sponsoring and making this event possible. And a biggest gratitude to my panelists for such key insights and to all of you for participation and staying put. All the best. Oh, a big thanks to, is it the capital? I think the food is sponsored. So go have breakfast for free. And the gifts from the hotel. Huh? Yeah, but from who? The hotel. Oh, okay. Thank you. Oh, they want more. They want me to thank them more, but it's fine. We really appreciate all your